It's about justice, really. It's not revenge. They are sick, radical left people, and they can't get away with it. And Comey was one of the people.
My family and I have known for years that there are costs to standing up to Donald Trump, but I'm not afraid.
The president made it very clear that he was going to be looking for accountability, and that's exactly what he's doing. We'll let the courts sort this out.
Well, I don't think there's a case. The charge is that Comey authorized the leak, and he didn't authorize the leak.
All right, time to bring in the panel. We got Fox News senior political analyst Juan Williams with us tonight, Matt Whitlock, former senior advisor for the National Republican Senatorial Committee, and Axios political reporter Steph Kite. Thanks to you all for being here. Matt, you know, the former FBI director, responding how any true influencer would with an Instagram post.
He's been doing that for a few years, whether it's posting thoughtful pictures of him looking at trees or pictures of shells he finds on the beach. I think he's really leaning into influencer mode. I think
shell arrangements he just stumbled upon.
That he just stumbled upon.
Yeah,
who knows who might have done that? And I think it's very interesting how few Democrats are defending him on the substance, but are going through the motions of saying Banana Republic, worse than Watergate, when it's really difficult for them to explain why this is, you know, so terrible when what happened for the last 4 years under the Biden administration to President Trump and so many of his associates was perfectly fine. They're going to have a tough time trying to navigate, you know, the inconsistency there.
So, Steph, to that point, here's Senator Durbin, Dick Durbin, on the indictment. He writes, the DOJ has become a political tool of a vengeful president. Trump wears his corruption like a badge of honor and defies anyone daring to challenge him. The Attorney General willingly complies with every order from the White House. Is there one Republican left in Washington who gives a damn?
I mean, that'll be the question I'm asking Republicans when they come back into town next week. It will be interesting to see whether we see any Republicans who have any concerns with the appearances of, you know, kind of political retribution. To Matt's point, you know, there are some real allegations here, and we've heard from Senator Chuck Grassley, for example, and Senator Cruz, who seem more encouraging of the indictment, saying that there are evidences that there could have been lying under oath and that it should be investigated. And if it's proven that he did lie, then he should be held accountable. But I am curious to hear whether there are Republicans who take concern with the fact that this does seem to be following this playbook that we've been seeing from the president of really pushing the Justice Department directly, clearly using his Truth Social posts to take action against his, you know, well-known political enemies.
But Juan, at the end of the day, President Trump, for all his posting on social media, did not indict James Comey. A federal grand jury panel of his fellow citizens indicted him this week.
Well, I think it's important for everyone considering this to really just look at the facts. And the facts are that you had a case brought by a newly appointed prosecutor because the established prosecutor would not bring the case, did not think he had a sufficiently strong case. You just saw Andy McCarthy, our colleague here at Fox, say he thinks it's a weak case. And the second thing to say is that the person who brought the case was never a prosecutor. And she is responding, I think, to the president's pressure and the social media posts and the like.
What about the jurors who voted for
well,
this
I think,
to go
you know
forward?
what, you know the old saying, you can indict a ham sandwich, but the thing is it going anywhere? And I think that's why Comey wants a speedy case. I think the argument from Democrats, because, you know, I mean, you heard what Matt said. You could say, oh, well, you know, there was lawfare before Trump. Now it's just on the other side. Boy, there's going to be a cascade afterwards if the Democrats ever get power. But right now, I think the argument is Trump is very interested in having people go after Adam Schiff, Letitia James, Lisa Cook, George Soros, because it gets his base away from talking about the Epstein case.
I mean, I certainly the White House disagrees with that, Matt. They say the Epstein case is, you know, a pile of dust on the ground at this point. It's certainly not something that a lot of Democrats have an appetite for. It's not like
when they have polling to
clean
show, this is not where the American people are focused. And I think President Trump, one thing that's important to remember is lawfare is, you know, something that really helped President Trump win his election. When President Trump was indicted, there was a shift in the primary polling, in the Republican primary, and it never shifted back. Donald Trump got more momentum from that because Republicans looked at Donald Trump and said, if they can go after him with this lawfare, they can go after me too. And it never shifted again. And President Trump used almost every speech he ever gave to talk about accountability. And when people say this is a revenge to a retribution, you have to say, revenge for what? And the answer to that question is a lot of what gives Republicans the comfort to say, I'm okay watching this go forward and seeing where this all plays out.
I want to switch topics because Netanyahu gave a thundering speech today at the UN General Assembly. Steph, he spoke to a nearly empty audience in typical UN fashion. You know, the core countries were dismissive of Israel as he was speaking. What did you think of his remarks?
I mean, it was an important moment. It comes as much of the world leaders have deserted Israel and their approach to Gaza, of course, recognizing Palestine as part of the assembly. And I think it's interesting to see the way that President Trump has responded as well, posting just recently, signaling that he thinks that they could be close to some kind of a deal with Gaza, that he wants the conflict there to end. And I think it's going to be really important to watch what happens on Monday when Trump and Bibi meet, whether Trump really sticks with his tone, whether he does put his foot down, or whether we see, which we have seen in the past, Netanyahu able to kind of convince Trump, change his mind, and we see Trump once again come back and giving Israel kind of the green light to move forward with their incursion.
When we were actually in commercial break a short while ago, the president posted on Truth Social about the ongoing talks. He said there is more goodwill and enthusiasm for getting a deal done after so many decades than I have ever seen before. Let's hope he is right in that assessment. Juan, we are going to now turn our attention to the winners and the losers of the week. What do you got for us?
Well, I think the clear winner of the week is Ukrainian President Zelensky, because President Trump has changed his tune on Russia and says now that he thinks the Ukrainians can win the war, and he thinks that Putin's a paper tiger. And not only that, he says he thinks they can hold on to their territory. My loser of the week, I think, is classy behavior, because Trump puts a picture of an auto pen in place of Joe Biden, former President Biden's picture in the White House Walk of Fame. You know, lowball.
All right, Steph, what about you?
My winner is Jimmy Kimmel, who is back on air after being paused briefly and a lot of uproar over some of his comments. And then my loser of the week is Chuck Grassley, who has been working really hard to try to handle this government shutdown situation better. And we've already seen just this week some negative headlines.
We had a picture of Chuck Schumer up there just for our audience members. Matt, go ahead.
My winner of the week, Seattle Mariners catcher Cal Raleigh, who tied Babe Ruth's single-season home run record with 60 home runs. He's got 4 more games to hit Roger Maris or my hometown hero Barry Bonds at 73. 4 games. I don't know if he's going to make it. My loser of the week is Abby Spanberger. You covered her story earlier this hour. There's another horrific crisis of men and women's bathrooms, and she is nowhere to be found on the issue. And as voters go to the polls, early voting is already happening. They can't get a straight answer from her.
All right, panel, thanks for being with us. Great to see you. Happy Friday.
Thank you, Julie.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.